Hey everyone, my name is Gilad Goldstein. I'm here today with Kenra Professional to show you how to cut a curly bob. Now, I love doing curly bobs behind the chair, but not only curly bobs, just curly cuts in general. So we're going to go over how to create a really strong perimeter line, so how you can get that nice length looking full, and then how you can etch the hair to create a really beautiful silhouette. So whether you want to create something round, achieve more graduation, or build more weight in a certain area, you're going to learn those techniques in this video. So grab your notebook, grab a mannequin, and let's cut some curly hair. For the curly bob, I'm going to be cutting the hair dry. So I've prepped the hair with Kenra Curl Defining Cream. Now, I love that for adding a little bit of moisture and just getting some curl definition before I go in with my haircut. So when you think about cutting curly hair, it's a lot different than straight hair. Obviously, they're two different textures. So you're going to see me working mostly with my fingers. Now, I could use a comb, but if you think about what happens with a comb on curly hair, it causes a lot of expansion, and we're not going to be able to get a good read on the actual shape that we're creating. So I'm sectioning off the front from the back, and we're going to start this curly bob in the back. Now, we have pulled the curl out slightly so that we have a little bit more control over the shape, but you want to make sure that your curl clumps aren't too clumped together before you start cutting. Pull the curls out so that they're falling out of their natural falling place, and then you can begin sectioning and doing your cut. I'm going to start this cut in the nape. So I'm taking my fingers and I'm just organically sectioning out the nape. This is a lot of hair, so you're going to have to break it down into working sections in order to build the shape that you're looking for. Now notice I am running my fingers through the section just slightly to make sure that the hair is flowing out of the root correctly. If we don't do that, the clumps of curls could mislead us as to where the hair is living, and we're not going to get a good result. The first thing we want to do for the curly bob is set the length. So I know that the length for this bob is going to be just below the neck. So once the hair is out in its natural fall, we can start cutting our shape. So I'm going to start by removing the majority of the length, just like this. And now that the hair is back in its natural fall, I'm going to be working freehand just to cut the perimeter the way I want it. I once learned from someone who specializes in a lot of curly cuts that it's important to take a step back as you're working, because sometimes we get so lost in the curls that it's really hard to see the overall shape. So always take a step back, assess from a distance, and that way you'll be able to see the silhouette that you're creating. Now we have the shape that we want in the nape, and I'm going to start dropping sections on top. Remember, we're using our fingers, not a comb, so I'm going to take a parting that is going to divide the back from the crown. So you can see it's a very organic parting. Because we prepped the hair properly and the roots are all flowing out of natural fall, it's pretty easy to organically section out the hair. But imagine if we hadn't taken the time to really pull these curls apart, this would be a lot more challenging to get through because you're going to run into snags and tangles. So be sure to prep the hair properly, take care of your curls, moisturize them, and then separate them before you begin cutting. Now, this is a lot of hair in the back section, so you might need to break it down. I'm going to break it down into 4 panels. So I have 1 panel, 2 panels, 3, and 4. We want to create a little bit of layering, but because we're still in the back section, I'm going to focus more on graduating the hair. So from a side view, the graduation is going to look like a buildup of volume towards the top. You're going to take your first panel, and you're going to find your guide for the length underneath. Graduating always happens at a low elevation, so I'm holding this hair at a 45-degree angle, and now with very little tension, I'm going to angle my shears diagonally up. And that cutting line is now building a little bit of volume towards the top. So now I'm going to start connecting that by using that cutting line as my guide. Pulling the hair out, remember to keep a low elevation. From that guide, we're going to start cutting volume up into the bob. So I love creating graduation on bobs, especially curly hair, because there's nothing like that beautiful volume that you can get when you graduate the hair properly. It's super satisfying, and also because we're layering the hair this way, we're able to redefine the curls by making them healthier and re-blunting. So I do a lot of point cutting whenever I'm working on my haircuts, but when we start to cut curly hair, I like to focus on creating blunt cuts. It's all about creating something that's healthy, and a solid curly end always looks better than something that's a little bit more wispy and frayed, because you don't want to have a lot of frizz with your curls unless you're really into the voluminous look. But generally, a healthy curl has a nice full revolution that feels solid to the end. So this is my last panel in the back. I'm looking for that guide, holding the hair at a low elevation, and then connecting to the guideline from the bottom. Now remember, we talked about taking a step back and reassessing your shape before moving on. So I'm just going to take a step back. I'm going to see if there's any hairs that need to be cut. And this is almost like sculpting. So get a little bit artistic, really look at what you've created, see the buildup of volume that's happening, and make any adjustments freehand as needed. And I find this cutting so satisfying because as an artist, you're able to really see the silhouettes that you're creating in real time. So it's not like we have to wait until we're blowing the hair dry to see what we've created. It's gonna build itself as we keep dropping sections down. So I'm feeling pretty good with where the back is with the graduation. Now we're moving on to the top. Now we can get a little bit more fun with this because I want to create some roundness in the layers, and now I have a little bit more leeway using the guideline from underneath. Now, with some of your guests who have curly hair, they might already have layers. And as you can see, this hair that I just dropped from the crown is already pretty short. So that doesn't mean that we need to cut all of this off to get the proper haircut. Let's be really mindful and intentional about what hair that we're cutting, especially on curly hair textures, because when you cut this hair, it's not going to grow as fast as straight hair. So make sure that we're respecting that hair as well while we're cutting it. Now, I'm going to position a side view so you're going to be able to see the elevation. We're going to start taking panels that radiate from the high point of the head. So imagine like a beach ball or a basketball, those pie-shaped slices. That's going to be what we're taking in the top section. So I've taken this first pie-shaped slice that's radiating from the highest point of the head, and I'm going to start to look for my guideline from the bottom. Now, you're going to have to look, especially if the layers are short, you're going to have to be really intentional about finding that guideline because they might be a little bit close together at this point. So I'm going to elevate this hair up and we're going to hold it at 90 degrees. So we're no longer at 45, we've lifted up to 90 degrees. Now I'm grabbing the hair in a bunch and I'm finding the guideline from the bottom, and I'm just going to make my cut. Now once we drop this, it's going to add some layering through the top. Even though we've cut a straight line, because this hair is coming from the round of the head, it's going to take on a curved shape. So I'm going to continue cutting panels in the crown section in the same way. So you'll see me do this again, taking another pie-shaped slice. Now we have a guideline from before, so I can grab my section, and remember your elevation is now shifted to 90 degrees. I can see my cutting line in my guide from before, and I'm just going to trim these ends. Now that was satisfying. You could see how frizzy and how thin those ends were. We just added fullness to the curl by re-blunting them. So now when she washes her hair, it's going to feel solid and healthy at those ends. I've got one last panel on this side. So remember the pie-shaped section. Drop out any hair that you've grabbed from the back because we don't want to recut the same stuff. So you just want to grab enough that you can see your guideline, find your elevation. There's really not a lot to cut in this section, so I might not even, let's see. It's funny, whenever you're cutting hair, you just have to find out what needs to go and what needs to stay. So you can use a formula, you can use a pattern, but it's also about using your artistic discretion, finding exactly what needs to go and what needs to stay on the head. And you can really see this shape building up. So the curls are going to graduate from the length. We're going to have a lot of fullness at the bottom. And then just in the crown, you can see all those layers are lifting into a beautiful round shape. I'm just going through on the other side, repeating the same process. So remember to find your guideline, hold the hair up at 90 degrees, and once you're there, you can make your cut. You also may have noticed I'm using a pretty long scissor for this. So this helps too, especially when cutting curly hair, because we're taking pretty large sections. So it has the strength to cut these larger sections, and you need that when you're cutting curly hair. So you can use the same tools as any other hair type, but I find that it's really helpful to have a long shear when I'm doing dry cutting specifically. So now we've cut the rest of the top section. This is looking really good. Remember, we always talk about using your artistic discretion. So I'm just etching where I need to etch and looking at the silhouette, and I'm looking for that buildup of weight into the roundness on top. You can fluff the hair a little bit as you go. I talk about straight hair combing it into place, but with curly hair, we want to separate the curls because once we wash and reset the hair, it's going to collapse a little bit once again, but we need to really see the outline of the shape first. So I'm pulling the hair out a little bit to do that. We're going to move on to the sides. So there's going to be a lot less hair to cut here. As you can see, it was already pretty short from the get-go. So I'm going to break it down into working sections. Divide the top from the bottom of the side. I'm gonna clip that out of the way. And now what we want to look for is to connect the perimeter from the back to the front. So again, there's not much to cut here. I'm just going to reblunt some of those ends. It's like my favorite term with curly hair is to reblunt. So anything that feels too thin or feels a little bit flyaway, I'm just trimming so everything feels solid and healthy. You'll want to check the hair from all views. So I'm looking from the side view. I'm going to have to look also from the front. So positioning myself in front, I'm able to see actually some of the perimeter here. And now I'm going to adjust it a little bit. Before I cut the rest of the top section, we're going to repeat the same process on the other side. So I'm dividing the top from the bottom of the side section. Now you can see the difference. We're going to have to cut to even out this perimeter. So remember, I'm just pulling a little bit of the curl out so that it's detangled. That'll help us create a more precise line while cutting curly hair. And we're just evening out that perimeter. Checking from the front for balance, you can always use a comb. I'm using a white comb so you can actually see the balance of the haircut. And now we're able to move on to the top. We could graduate this section a little bit in the bottom, but as you can see, it's already starting to stack up on itself. So if you want to do any graduation in here, you can do it freehand. It really depends on the density. This mannequin head has a pretty medium density of hair. So some of it's already stacking up on itself and there's already some layering. So I'm not going to cut too much off, but just enough so that it feels like there's a nice silhouette that's building the volume towards the top. We're going to move on to the top. So I'm going to release these sections. And we have options. So you can see some of our clients might prefer having a flatter look because some people like the look of length. So you have to have the consultation and the conversation with your client before you decide how you're going to layer the top. Let's create a little bit of roundness in the layering, just like we did in the back. So we're going to grab this top section. I'm going to take a small panel starting at the back, and I'm going to hold the hair straight out. You should have a guideline from the back that will tell you how much you can trim off to blend the lengths. So I'm pulling a small amount of hair from the back as my guide, and I'm using that, marrying it into the front sections, grabbing the hair in bunches, and I can see where we can start to layer the hair. Dropping that section out, pulling it apart to see what we've created, and now I'm going to continue working my way to the front. I'm going to over direct to the previous section, so it'll get slightly longer as we get to the front. This is intentional because we are going to cut some face framing curly pieces. So over direct to the previous section, find your guideline, and there's not much to cut left in this last section, and we're gonna drop it. Don't forget, we're always gonna check that outline. So here I can see I wanna etch a little bit more of the graduation, and I'm just gonna do that freehand. It's starting to look really good here. So we're gonna pull this apart and do the same thing on the other side. And I'm gonna stress this one more time because as you're cutting this curly hair, especially on your clients, they might already have previous haircuts. Like not everyone is starting from something completely one length or completely blunt. Some people already have a lot of layers in the hair, and so you might have to pivot this technique to achieve the same result on them. Don't cut hair just for the sake of cutting hair. Make sure that you have a purpose with each cut. So you're always looking for a guide, and if the guide doesn't exist, that probably means you shouldn't cut any of the hair off. So you can really see as I'm working with the front sections, there's not a ton to cut here, and that's okay. I'm not going to force it. So we're just going to look for the guide. Once you see where those ends are, now I'm just going to trim them. This is great, especially if you just need a curly trim too. You can always grab some of the hair in bunches. It'll really reveal where it starts to get a little bit more flyaway, and you can trim those ends right off. Now that we have the base of the bob, we're gonna add a little bit of face framing in the front. So take a moment, put the scissors down, be really intentional about what you're gonna cut. So if I cut this entire section, we're gonna end up with a really full, strong bang in the front. I'm just trying to create some face framing. So the first thing I'm gonna do is I'm going to divide a small amount of the curls in front away from the rest of the hair. Now I'm gonna give you a little tip. You can take this parting to where the front of the ear is. That's gonna be the front of the hair, and that's where we're gonna create those face framing pieces. Remember, we already created the shape of the bob behind that, So we don't need to necessarily cut so much hair behind the ear. And that's why I can part just to the front of the ear. And we're going to envision our framing line. So I want to create something that when she wears her hair in a center part, she has just a nice little bit of face framing that works its way all the way down to the length. So if you see this right here, this is going to be my guideline for the length, and I'm going to create a diagonal line that's going to be our face framing. So there's a couple ways you can do this. One is you can hold the hair as a bunch and cut it. That over direction is going to make it get longer to the bottom. But because it's the face frame area, I like to do it freehand. I'm standing in front of the hair and I'm just figuring out where I want that shortest piece to live, and I'm going to cut that first curl. Now once we have that first curl cut, we can start to angle down into the length. And this is giving us just a little bit more visual layering in the front that she'll be able to get a nice little curly bang with. You can see the arc that we just created. We're gonna do the same thing on the opposite side. So that's my shortest point. Going to cut an angle from the shortest point down to the length. Great. Feel good about this face framing, so I'm gonna release the rest of the hair. We're gonna start to position those curls slightly out of the face. So I'm running my fingers just through the roots. You'll notice that I'm not going all the way through the ends. We're fluffing up the roots for a little bit of volume. And now if you want to, you can create some fun, smaller pieces by taking just a little bit of hair by the face and cutting some more angles. So that's the base of the curly bob. I'm gonna go ahead and add a little bit more moisture back into the hair and restyle, and I'll see you when the style's finished. So we just finished blow drying the curly bob, and this is the result. So after cutting the nice face framing pieces around the eyes, now she has the ability to wear the hair out of her face and add a little bit of volume. So you can see the nice silhouette that we've created with the graduation and how it leads into the layers that we've created on top. Now, I love this technique, whether we're creating a short curly bob, a medium, or a long curly bob. You can use the same principles that we used in this haircut on any curly cut, and they're gonna give you really great results behind the chair. So I hope you learned something fun in this video. Let me know what you learned in the comments. And if you enjoyed this content, follow Kenra Professional for more, and I'll see you in the next video.